So after finishing the first chapter of Why Meadow Died, uh, here are my general thoughts about it. The first chapter really is dedicated to a teacher who was in the school at the time of the actual shooting and that teacher's experience. And so basically just laying some groundwork about what the experience was like and heavily focused on what the school's response was after the fact. So not a lot of facts yet to be able to start looking at, what role restorative justice or restorative practices might have played in the active shooting itself. That said, the teacher talks a good bit about the school's response after the fact, and I can say with pretty good certainty that there was no indication whatsoever that there were any restorative practices as it related to reestablishing trust in a school where there had been an active shooting, many injuries, many deaths, no restorative practices from the teacher's point of view. No real invitation, no real circles, conferences to process through the experience itself. No real circles, conferences, or really anything restorative about how do we come back into a school setting? How do we establish trust in the classroom? How do we establish trust in the community? Nothing there that I see. The other thing that I thought was notable was that in addition to the fact that there's nothing really restorative in the trying to reestablish and process through the school system after the fact, what was missing was pre-work on the part of the people who were doing like trauma counseling, for example, after the shooting. Now, the teacher talks about an encounter that she finally had after months and months and months with a school representative and trying to identify and maybe help process through the trauma of the incident. That the teacher is describing that, and she talks about the fact that the person that was talking to her really didn't know the general facts of the shooting, of the school itself, how the school was laid out, all things that would be very, very important. That first of all created community in the classroom and in the school system itself. The physical structure is part of what makes us feel safe to participate in community, for example, especially when we're dealing with minors. And the counselors weren't aware of that. They weren't aware of the names of the people who'd gotten shot. They weren't aware of the particulars. And I think that's an incredibly huge missing piece of what I would call restorative work. I cannot imagine that if you were going to go into address trauma, that you wouldn't do the work, the basic work of understanding, what happened, the names of the people who were involved, the names of the people who were injured and died, the names of the people who survived. Even from a counselor's point of view, how would you know how to be sensitive to potentially triggering facts, things like that. Like that was shocking to me that the person that she did talk to obviously had not done the necessary pre-work to do that type of restorative practice or just trauma counseling. That said, I mean, I feel pretty factual about everything I've said up to this point, so I'm going to just make a little bit of an opinion here, and that is, if the school system had made a commitment to restorative practices, it seems as if those would have carried into the processing through this traumatic event. It seems odd that you would make that a big part of your agenda, and then when you really need it, it's not there. In fact, I think one of the things about restorative practices is that they're so effective at establishing community in a time of trauma or really any negative force. Those restorative processes and practices are just going to bubble up. They're just going to be there naturally, and they weren't. And that makes me very suspicious of the whole restorative, practice um, that the school has been labeled with. Now, that said, I have an open mind. I'm waiting to see. This is just chapter 1. So let's see where we go from here. But so far, at least through the aftermath, which is all we've looked at so far, there's nothing restorative about the way this trauma was addressed or dealt with.